Occasionally, and it used to happen more so when I would travel back from a red eye for IndyCar on the West Coast. But this is, without question, a sleep deprivation Tuesday. And it is actually for probably a lot of you. And I get it. Matter of fact, I need to get the Java House behind me here because today is a Java House day for certain.
I got just because it's over here.
What's that?
I've got a cup of Java House over here.
Yeah, not just because it's 50 and cloudy out, which is perfect coffee weather, but the Wrangler energy today for sure. Right?
That's what I've got, Jake. After that game last night,
totally, and that's where I'm going with it. It is a sleep deprivation Tuesday for all, and there are several reasons why it could be a sleep deprivation Tuesday. It's entirely possible that you are tired and dragging today because yesterday you spent time going back and again watching Jonathan Taylor tiptoeing his way down the sidelines en route to a touchdown run that was emphatic in putting away the Tennessee Titans, and you still have not gone to sleep because you are afraid of falling asleep and interrupting this dream that is the Colts at 7-1. This surreal nature of the fact that you living in Indianapolis live in the city that is home to the best by record team in the National Football League. And maybe it's a sleep deprivation Tuesday for you because you spent the better part of the night going back and forth in your mind trying to figure out whether or not you consider the most valuable player to be Jonathan Taylor or Daniel Jones. Maybe you spent the better part of the night sitting there while you were staring at the ceiling at 3:48 in the morning, wondering what life would be like if Daniel Jones had not been brought in by Chris Ballard. Maybe all of those things kept you awake. Maybe it's the excitement and anticipation of the Pittsburgh Steelers coming next on the schedule in Pittsburgh. Any of those things might have kept you up. Could be that you were laying there awake, tossing and turning and punching the pillow, but with a glee and a smile on your face because you were sitting there thinking to yourself, eventually I'm going to wake up from this dream. But I don't want to, so I'm just going to keep on with whatever it is that's keeping it alive, that Indiana is the best team in college football. And now they are going up against, to close out the Big Ten season, literally the bottom of the Big Ten, at Maryland, at Penn State. Whoever would have thought you'd say that about Penn State. And then Wisconsin and Purdue. And yes, Purdue's a rivalry game. I get it. Maybe that's what was keeping you awake last night. Or it could be that you actually are a little bit dragging today. You have a little bit less pep in your step because you've been spending sleepless nights laying, wondering what happens now with the Pacers. Every time you start to fall asleep, you jerk up in the middle of the night awake because you have the PTSD of Tyrese Halliburton slapping against the floor in Oklahoma City and wondering what could have been. And now you have that same PTSD because of the fact that not just Benedict Mathurin, not just Andrew Nimhard, not just, obviously, Tyrese Halliburton, not just TJ McConnell, not just Talon Peter. Endlessly it seems as though the injuries just keep coming and coming and coming for the Pacers. Maybe that's what kept you awake at night. Or it could be it's what, in fact, kept me awake. And while we were not sleeping next to each other in the same bed, nor in the same room, nor in the same residence, but perhaps somewhat adjacent zip codes, that Eddie and I both this morning are tired because we were up late last night for this reason. And yes, it is unique. It is unusual. It is not even necessarily strategic that you would begin a sports talk radio show in Indianapolis, Indiana in late October talking about baseball. It's not a baseball town. People love the Cubs here. I get it. A lot of Reds fans here. I get it. Probably some Cardinals fans. I get it. It's not a baseball town. But I think there are a lot of you that are dragging this morning because you were up late last night watching a historic Game 3 in the World Series. And I bring it up because something happened in it that I think is relatable to all of the teams that I just mentioned. Last night, if you are unaware, and I don't know how you would be, but if you are unaware last night, the World Series in game number 3 between the Blue Jays, which I've been a diehard fan now for 8 weeks, the Blue Jays and the Dodgers.
I thought it was 9 weeks now because last week was 8.
I'm getting confused. I have my hat in the car. I should have brought it in. I wore my hat today because I wanted my guys in blue and red to know that I was proud of them after that last night.
You know, now that I think of it, Jake, it's probably better off that you did not wear the hat because I think when you wear the hat, it's bad luck. When you don't wear the hat, it's good luck.
Okay, as a diehard fan, I can add to that. If I wear the 93 commemorative hat, it's bad luck. If I wear the modern-day all-blue hat, it's good luck. That I do know.
Which one's in the car?
The good luck one.
Okay, good.
Because I was proud of him. I was proud of him. Okay? Last night, 18 innings in the World Series. But let me tell you what happened in that game twice. Twice in extra innings. And I watched all 18 innings. Freddie Freeman, the walk-off home run for the Dodgers. 2 things about last night, and there's a reason I'm bringing up baseball here because I think it ties in to our local teams. Shohei Ohtani, if you have not watched yet the World Series, you probably missed your window. Because other than the bases being loaded in a tie game in extra innings, and it has to be extra innings because a run then walks it off. A bases loaded extra innings at bat, I'm not kidding you when I tell you this, is now the only time that you should pitch to Shohei Ohtani. He should be intentionally walked every time he comes to the plate, including a bases loaded appearance in the 5th, 6th, 7th inning. I don't care. I would walk in the run versus taking my chances of pitching to a guy that in his last 7 official at-bats in the World Series has hit 5 home runs and 2 doubles. And last night, he made it on base 9 times out of 9 appearances at the plate. If you count making it on base being twice, running all the way around him because of a home run. What this guy is doing, who is scheduled to now pitch in Game 4 and volunteered to pitch if they needed it in Game 3, what this guy is doing is, the World Series, for me even, in years past, has kind of just like come and gone for me. But what this guy is doing right now, everyone should tune in if he gets another at-bat, is historic to the level of never seen before. This may well be, and I know that there is a lot of hyperbole that takes place in sports, this may well be the finest baseball player to have ever played the game. Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, you name it. His ability to pitch the way he does and hit the way he does, and I know he's not an every at-bat average base hitter, but his power ability, he's a 280, I think, lifetime hitter, but his power ability and his pitching ability, the combination of the two makes him quite possibly the greatest baseball player of all time. But last night, not once but twice in extra frames. One of them might have actually been in the 8th or 9th. I mean, when you have 18 innings, they kind of all run together. But there were 2 occasions, notably, when it was still 5-5 and the Blue Jays had a runner on first. Vlad Guerrero is on deck. They get a hit that ricochets off of, and it was an unbelievable move by the guy holding the sound dish for the television broadcast to narrow. It clipped him, but it did not impact the trajectory of the baseball. but you had a base hit where the runner from first tries to score from first. I think it was from first. The point being, there were two different occasions. One happened at third base and one happened at home plate, where Toronto got too aggressive on the base paths and ended innings both times by being thrown out. And the play that happened at home and a cutoff throw by the Dodgers was as precise and bang-bang as it gets. But the play at home plate was not.
That one was in the 10th.
Clear out. The 10th?
Yeah.
Okay. And Guerrero is on deck, and you're thinking to yourself, why in the world would you not hold your man at third knowing that Vlad Guerrero is on deck? And the reason for that is this. The reason for that is because that is what happens when you have an offense that has not just Mookie Betts, not just Muncy, not just Freddie Freeman, but Shohei Ohtani. When you have that offense there, it forces you out of your normal strategy. It forces you away from the way that you normally play, and it makes you become errantly aggressive because of the paranoia of what can happen on the other side. But in addition to that, the belief and the understanding that you need to score whenever there's even the sliver of opportunity. And that's what happened to Toronto, and that took Toronto, who is a very, very good base-hitting team, away from and back off of the diamond, having to go back onto defense because they were playing not to lose as opposed to playing to win. And the Indianapolis Colts right now, in terms of their offense, we can talk about and we can discuss whether or not Chris Ballard, a week from today is the deadline, makes a move to get them pass rush. We can talk about and we can discuss whether or not Chris Ballard, a week from today for the trade deadline, makes a move for defensive back help. And I think he probably will. And it's probably smart and behoove of him to do so. But at the same time, one of the Colts' best suits right now, one of their hip pocket strategies right now, one of their benefits may well be that their offense is clicking in such cohesion and perfectly orchestrating off of one another with Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce and Tyler Warren and Josh Downs and Ashton Doolin. That offense is playing at such a level with Daniel Jones perfectly orchestrating it and seeing over the course of the field. And you notice who I haven't mentioned yet. That offense is so good, and teams are so aware of the fact that if you get too far behind, then the Colts start milking and taking care of clock by handing it off to Jonathan Taylor, who is not having Shohei Ohtani level unforeseen success, but is pretty darn good. And what you hope now, and where they may well be headed, is that the Colts' best defense may in fact be the fact that their offense is so cohesive, is so careful with the football, is so time controlling, and has the potential to home run hit you behind when you start handing the ball off to Jonathan Taylor, that what in fact they are going to do is force teams to start sending the runner home even though he should stay at third and take his shot, because they are forcing teams out of their comfort zone to get too aggressive beyond what they want to do, because you're looking at an offense that is clicking on all cylinders unlike any in the National Football League and scoring at an efficient clip that is literally historic within this century. That's what they're doing to people. And that alone may allow you to get by without necessarily making a move and getting yourself a pass rusher to complement DeForest Buckner, Liatu Latu, Kwity Paye, whatever it may be. Now, I think they still will do so. But if, in fact, Chris Ballard, when it comes to the trade deadline, decides to hold the runner at third, you may get away with the fact that other offenses are sending the runner home prematurely or too aggressively. The Pacers, on the other hand, made a move yesterday. The Pacers made a move in going out and signing a player in McClung that is most known for two things. He's most known for routinely and virtually annually winning the dunk contest, it seems, and having people go, how is this guy not in the league? And in doing so, they released James Wiseman. The Wiseman release to me is peculiar. Not because of Matt McClung. I get it. The Pacers are in desperate need in backcourt help. They signed him to a multi-year deal, which to me was interesting, instead of like a 10-day or a two-way or whatever else. But that's a different story. But you could analyze whether or not the Pacers, in doing that and making that move, are they in fact getting too aggressive and waving their runner home? Or is this something that needs to be done and they see something even beyond just what the signing was? And we'll hear from Rick Carlisle in just a couple of minutes, who was on the morning show this morning here on The Fan. And we'll play you some of that in regards to this. But let me tell you, and Eddie, once I say it, I want you to tell me whether or not what I'm saying is too aggressive a comment or maybe remains to be seen, which I think is probably the latter.
Okay.
But something that has been keeping me awake at night. Theme. Tyrese Halliburton, we know, had an Achilles injury. As Tyrese Halliburton was pounding the floor in Oklahoma City, we knew then this is a year-long injury. And he looks very good so far in terms of his recovery, of the things that you've seen him do, the way that I see a little bit of a limp when he's coming out onto the floor at, during timeouts and whatnot. But his spirits seem good, and his, all of those things look good. But that is a far cry from playing in an NBA game. If you look at James Wiseman and his release, and you look at the center position, I know that I'm probably that we saw before. And I have every ounce of faith within me that Tyrese Halliburton is going to do every single thing that he can to get back to being the Tyrese Halliburton that captured the NBA's imagination some 4 months ago. And I don't have any doubt that he has the skill set, the knowledge, the vision, all of those things. But I also go by precedent. Different size, different player, different necessity of movement. I understand. But there were two players on the Pacers roster that were coming off of the same injury that Tyrese Halliburton had. And those two players are James Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson. And it's 3 games. It's 3 games. There's zero reason to think that this definitively means that this is who these guys are in 3 months. And with Tyrese Halliburton, they're going to give him every ounce of time necessary. But there is a part of me that is curious of this and laying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, leading to a sleep deprivation Tuesday. Part of that is because I can't rule out and I can't dismiss and I can't deny the fact of the possibility in my mind. The fear is a better word. The fear in my mind as I watch James Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson, and I say, these are two players coming off of the same injury that Tyrese Halliburton right now is navigating through. And I'm very curious to see what level they are athletically speaking versus what they were pre-injury. Isaiah Jackson was a human pogo stick. Maybe he still is. It's early. It's 3 games in. I totally get it. I totally get it. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying definitively that what we're seeing right now is what we are going to see in the long term with Isaiah Jackson. But so far, he doesn't seem to have the same bounce. He doesn't seem to have the same lateral quickness. And yes, foul trouble was always kind of an issue with him to begin with in terms of just discipline of play, but it seems like he's less springy, to use the term. And then James Wiseman, who's the other one, we didn't know a lot about what he could do because he played literally like 8 minutes a year ago before the injury happened. But now he's back, and already he's been released. Now, part of that is attrition due to the fact that they have desperate need at the backcourt. But they have desperate need at center as well. And yet he was one that they found to be, they could capably release him and to make space elsewhere. Those things kind of keep me awake. Now, Eddie, am I being too aggressive in my fear there, or is it a legitimate concern?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. And I don't want to be that guy, but it's only 3 games in, as you mentioned, especially with James Wiseman. Now, there's another element to it that I'm curious to see. I mean, Isaiah Jackson has bulked up. Like, he is bigger than he was at any other point in his career.
Correct.
So how does that factor into it as well? And,
yeah.
It's something that over time is slowly going to start coming back. It's not like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like I said, I'm the first to admit the almost irresponsibility of definitively saying that in 3 games. It's for the first time it started to creep into my mind. Now, does that mean that that's going to keep me awake when we get into the holidays? I hope not, right?
I'd also have to look and see where we at on a timeline in terms of where Isaiah Jackson was with his return in relation to when Halliburton will be back.
Well, with Halliburton also, Wiseman, for example, it was basically right. It was exactly a year ago because it was right at the beginning of the season. Halliburton had an off season as well, although albeit a very short one. And Halliburton, they're going to give him whatever amount of time he needs, no question about that. But we'll let you hear from Rick Carlisle coming up on a couple of these things in just a couple of minutes. Also, last night, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder, please, Eddie? This is why there is nothing to me that is more bunk in sports. There's nothing that I hate more. I mean, I hate more. You hear J&B will talk about, sports nerds, right? I'm not going to go there per se, although I don't disagree with him on the over-analytical stuff. But the thing that I've never understood is when people say, if you looked at it, ESPN said at the time that such and such happened, they had a 97% chance of winning that game, and then they lost. Well, games are always 50-50 to the final horn. But I never buy into that because last night I happened to look. at the beginning. It was probably 5th inning of the Major League Baseball game last night of the World Series. And I looked down at my phone to check it, and it says in fantasy football, in the Chicago's Pizza Fantasy Football League, that Why Not Indiana trademark is a 99% chance of winning over Tyrone's lifting buddy, also known as Eddie Garrison's team, right, who's had the better season. Right? And in a week where I had buys, I think you did too, and injuries and everything else, I had a 99% chance of winning the game.
Yep.
All that needed to happen.
Was that at halftime?
I think that was like midway through the 3rd quarter. Going into the 4th quarter, perhaps. I didn't watch a lot of the football game last night. But nonetheless, Eddie needed a miracle, a hope and a prayer, a wing and a prayer, and sure enough, the Kansas City Chiefs deliver it because the one guy you had on the field, you needed like 25 points from him. And what's he end up with? Like a 99-yard touchdown reception in the 4th quarter in a meaningless game? Isn't that right?
No, not quite. 9 catches, 93 yards, a touchdown score from Rashee Rice, 25.5. I beat Jake by over a point.
Yeah.
You got lucky twice, though.
In a meaningless game.
You got lucky twice, though.
How's that?
Rashee Rice was down on the inch line on the first touchdown drive for Kansas City, and then he misses another touchdown by a yard.
Them's the breaks.
It doesn't matter. I still won.
Them's the breaks. All right, we'll come back. Rick Carlisle, what he had to say earlier today about the things that we just talked about, including the newest Pacer, and it's one that is known in particular for one big thing, but it doesn't mean that that's why the Pacers signed him. We'll let you hear next. So Rick Carlisle was on this morning on the Fan Morning Show with James Boyd, of course, Kevin Bowen, Jeff Rickard, as he is each and every Tuesday. A little bit later this morning because of the fact that they are in the Central Time Zone in his old stomping grounds of Dallas to take on the Mavericks. And Cooper Flagg, it's hard to believe, actually. You know, the Mavericks have, 3 number 1 overall picks on their roster? That is a loaded team. Assuming it all comes together for them at some point, I think they will be really, really good. But yesterday, the news came out a little bit after we were off the air that now there have been 3 players that have won the NBA dunk contest while representing the Indiana Pacers. Now, bit of a curveball on number 1 because Darnell Hillman.
Yeah.
Darnell Hillman, when selected to be in the first ever NBA dunk contest, was a member of the Pacers. But between the time that he was announced to be in the dunk contest and when the dunk contest took place, which was during the NBA Finals of that year, he had been moved to the Nets. So, of course, that's the famous story that Mark Monteith has told where the Bottle Shop, which is a liquor store at 49th and College, he had played on a softball team sponsored by the Bottle Shop that had kind of blue and yellow striped jerseys, and he was at the dunk contest, and they're like, well, hey, you're with the Nets now, but you're here as a representative technically of the Pacers because that's who you played with over the year, and he didn't have any Pacer stuff with him, so he went ahead and he had a Bottle Shop softball jersey, and he wore that during the dunk contest, and thus those shirts have been sold, which are pretty cool. I actually have one. I should wear it tomorrow. But he would be the first in terms of, if you want to go that way, Pacers in the dunk contest. Then others doing it. Terrence Stansbury got completely robbed with his Statue of Liberty dunk. I remember Paul George being in it. I think Jonathan Bender was in it one year. But those that have won it as Pacers.
Victor Oladipo was also in it as a Pacer.
Oladipo was. I do remember that.
So was Glenn Robinson.
Glenn Robinson, the third, won it.
Yep.
So he won it. So too did Freddie Jones. That's what I was going to say. Those are the two. So... But Mac McClung...
Was Gerald Green a Pacer when he entered?
He was definitely in it before becoming a Pacer. I think he might have also as a Pacer, right? Been in it. Gerald Green was in... Gerald Green is the classic example of a guy that could dunk, could leap, but then the rest of the game wasn't necessarily a pure basketball player. Now, Mac McClung, on the other hand... You think of him as the dunker. He has multiple times been an NBA dunk champion. He played with Orlando for like a cup of coffee. He has been on a few 10-day contracts, but now he has a multi-year deal with the Pacers. And as Rick Carlisle had said, you might think that they're just getting this guy for highlight purposes in a depleted backcourt and to dunk. But guess what? Maybe there's more there.
Well, he can score. He's a hard-playing guy. For all the things we did in the workout yesterday, he didn't dunk the ball once. So let's get off of the dunking thing as kind of the attraction here. We need a guy that has energy, can go hard, is healthy. I think is healthy is probably the number one thing, and that can play a couple of positions. So he can play point, can play off the ball. He's had some very good NBA games, although I think this is true. I believe this is the first NBA contract he's ever signed. I know he's been on a two-way with some clubs and gotten some NBA time as a two-way, but I don't believe he's ever gotten any time or signed a uniform player contract, veteran player contract ever before this. So it's a big opportunity, a big moment for him.
Now, you heard him mention the fact of like 10-day contracts and, guys, kind of hardship type contracts. It's interesting because I was talking to, and by the way, I realize I say the term it's interesting way too much, but I was talking with J and V at the Colts game on Sunday, and we were discussing just the Pacers in general and their game. Eddie, when was that the Pacers played in Minnesota?
That would have been
Saturday night?
Sunday. Memphis was Saturday.
Okay, that's it. And so what I was talking with John about and this might have even been yesterday in talking about that Minnesota game, was I kept going back to the game against Orlando, I believe it was, immediately following the brawl. And the brawl, sometimes it feels like 50 years ago and sometimes it feels like 2 weeks ago. When I worked at WRTV, Channel 6, there is, and I was everything there from an editor to a producer to a reporter to a fill-in anchor, but I mean primarily, especially in the later years, it was basically Dave First and I were the entire sports department. And the video that I remember editing more than any other video in terms of getting it ready to that aired on a newscast was that of the brawl. It seemingly was our lead story or lead sports story for, I mean, I don't have to tell people here, 6 months between trials and appeals and suspensions and you name it, just on and on and on and on and on and on. But after the brawl, there was this love affair with, free Ron Artest and Steven Jackson, and the emotions of it all, kind of went all across the map, and then people resented, etc. But that very first game after the brawl, they went out and, Fred Jones had like 36. Crozier was on the floor. And then they eventually went out and signed like Britton Johnson and Tremaine Folks and Maceo Baston and players, just seemingly 10-day contract level players. And it was, to me, reminiscent when I was watching the other night with all of these injuries and all the players we've mentioned that are injured. Andrew Nembhard injured, and obviously Tyrese Halliburton injured, and T.J. McConnell injured, and you just go on and on. Benedict Mathurin injured, and all of these injuries that have taken place, and I kept going back to that game immediately following the brawl, and that's why I was fascinated by it, and it popped, and I went, yeah, see, I know I'm not crazy when I'm staring at the ceiling during my brain droppings. Because Rick Carlisle was talking about the overall injuries to this particular roster and told Kevin Bowen this morning what he thought when Kevin asked if he'd ever been through anything like this.
Not like this. I mean, we went through the brawl stuff, and we were very depleted as a team during that, and we had to bring in a lot of reinforcements, and there was a lot of stuff going on with suspensions at that time. So we actually had less players available in a few of the games at that time. But this is different. I think one thing you can surmise from this, looking at us and Oklahoma City, I think Oklahoma City has 7 guys out, or did leading to last night. They played Dallas last night. We now have 8 guys out, and both teams played to the very last day of the season. So very possible that playing that number of games may be part of this. It may not. Some of these injuries really something related to a left shoulder, like with Nembhard. You can't really trace that to playing a lot last year and having a short summer. But Ben stepping on a guy's foot in Memphis, that's bad luck, certainly more than anything. But it's an interesting coincidence.
By the way, speaking of injuries in Dallas, Cooper Flagg has a sore shoulder. I think he is expected to play, however, when the Pacers take on the Mavs. But as for the center position that we talked about as well, in order to make room for Mac McClung, then James Wiseman was waived or released. And that means now that you are at Isaiah Jackson, you're at Jay Huff. Obviously, you can play Toppin at that position. There are things that, Tony Bradley's on the roster, who is a big rebounding type center. Rick Carlisle, though, on the different faces now and situations present at the center position.
Well, all of them have gotten pretty significant opportunity. They all bring some unique skill set stuff that's going to be very important to our team. And so, we need all of them. in terms of, what does this thing look like? Who's the definite starter, who's the definite backup, all that kind of stuff. The other night we started Huff at 4 because of our roster situation, and just simply trying to balance it out so that we could sub on a more or less normal basis. And he did some good things, as the start 4. So Memphis and Minnesota, both teams that start the game big. Dallas is another big team. So, if he doesn't start at 4, he is a very good chance he'll see some more minutes at that position. And, right now, a lot of guys are getting their feet wet doing some different things than probably they've ever done. But we're going to have to turn those things into positives.
Rick Carlisle again this morning. He is kind enough to do that each and every Tuesday, mostly Tuesdays, but certainly once a week on the Fan Morning Show, and presumably will be doing so throughout the course of this basketball season. All right, when we come back, sometimes in sports, I think it is when people are down that everything comes out of the woodwork. Sometimes I think it's unjust. Sometimes I think, wonder what took so long. I'll explain next. When you hear this song, Eddie, you think immediately of what?
Gary Brackett doing the drums before a Pacers game, or not Pacers game, a Colts game in the RCA Dome as he's stretching out on the field.
Okay, fair. There's that famous video, the two kids that allegedly are hearing it for the first time, right? I think of Risky Business, but I think in Risky Business, the train scene, it's not the drum, it's the beginning of the song, not the drum portion.
Yep.
College football news, we haven't really gotten into this, but I do think that it could have potentially some local impact. Brian Kelly's a very good football coach. And I think at Notre Dame, people knew he was a very good football coach. But the problem is at Notre Dame, at LSU, at Penn State, at Alabama, you've got to be an elite football coach. And I think Brian Kelly is very good. And I don't know Brian Kelly. I've not been around Brian Kelly. I don't know that I've ever even interviewed Brian Kelly. But there were already hints of Brian Kelly being just a complete, what's the word I could use here?
You know what?
Jerk, right?
You know, the thing, Pat
D-bag.
Knight. You could quote Pat Knight, could you?
No, because Pat Knight can say, blame my language on my dad. I can't, right? But
if you have two of these, they breed. Is that
that's
what
right.
you're saying? You can only
That's
have
right.
one of them?
You can have one, but if you have two, they breed. Look, it goes without saying.
Not a beehole. I guess it's technically a beehole, right?
Really arrogant. I mean, that's the best way to say it. Brian Kelly, at least by reputation, very, very arrogant guy. And difficult and demanding. And there's an element of, yes, there's an element of demanding that needs to be there in order to be, a great coach. I mean, that goes without saying. But, and we can go back to and rest his soul. And, God bless his family, Declan Sullivan. It can't be an easy time for his family right now, because he is the student manager that was up in a scissor lift videotaping a Notre Dame football practice when in the forecast, everybody knew the weather was going to be adverse, and he himself had even sent a post on social media before the practice began saying, oh gosh, high winds forecasted today. I guess I've lived long enough. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty close to accurate to what he said. And then when he was up there, he sent another post about how terrifying it was being that high up in a lift during the wind. Now, whether or not Brian Kelly demanded he be up there and said, no, he's not to come down, we can go round and round over the validity of that. But obviously Declan Sullivan, the scissor lift blew over, and he was fatally injured in a terrible tragedy. But beyond that, and not to say that that's not case enough if Brian Kelly was in the wrong there, that's obviously terribly egregious. But his overall demeanor, just now that he's been fired at LSU, it's coming out of the woodwork now of people telling stories of, hey, I met this guy here and he was a complete jerk. And certainly, we've seen even 3 weeks ago, he was a complete condescending jerk to a reporter after a game that asked a completely legitimate question about his offensive inefficiency for his football team. And he just was always like this red-faced, smartest guy in the room. And I get, to an extent, as a coach and as a leader, sometimes you got to get in guys' grill. I get it. And we live in a softer society. And I get all of that. I'm not here to argue any of that. But there's also a way in which you can go about doing it where you don't come off like you are, again, just completely condescending and et cetera. And Pompous, yes.
Egotistical?
All of it. And the latest, there's another story that's come out from somebody that two of the assistants, both of which went on to big-time coaching careers, that were assistants of his at Central Michigan, that when they were younger assistants, Brian Kelly had a party at his multi-million-dollar home in Michigan during the wintertime, and his two assistants both thought that they were being invited in order to go and be, just guests of the party. And they got there, and he was like, hey, you know what? Like, you're going to park cars and shovel the driveway. And as story goes, they went back and said, you know what? We're never treating people that way. And now at LSU that he's been fired, I've seen multiple stories of people like, hey, he did this when I was at a camp, or he was this way, that way.
I saw a player say something about, he got injured and he was a key contributor. I forget the guy's name, but he gets injured and has to medically retire. And Brian Kelly went from talking to him all the time to not talking to him at all once he got injured. And he won't touch base with him ever since.
Matt LaFleur was one of the assistants, by the way, that was involved in the party. And yes, it seems like a guy that has time for you when it can help him and has no time for you if you can't help him, right? And now he's on the outside looking in, and you wonder this. You wonder if Brian Kelly, his pedigree is that of an upper echelon coach. If Brian Kelly was a super nice guy, if Brian Kelly had the personality of, Marcus Freeman seems like a really good dude, right? I don't know Marcus Freeman, but his persona is that he's very likable. I think Curt Cignetti is actually a taskmaster, and I think Curt Cignetti is probably, in his moments, pretty difficult to deal with, but his persona is that of happy-go-lucky, fun to be around, has a sense of humor. The only time I ever saw Brian Kelly have a sense of humor was when he tried to use the old John McKay line, and he was asked, what do you think of your team's execution? And he was like, I think it's a good idea. But he was so unconvincing in delivering the humor that it went off the wrong way to Alex Flanagan. But people are coming out of the woodwork now, and I think a big part of that is just the way in which he went about his business. Sometimes the way that the one thing, sports can teach us lessons in life. When the going gets tough, and it does at some point for all of us, no matter what line of work you're in, no matter what you do, there are times in life when you get tested a little bit, and all of a sudden, and sometimes it happens, they come in threes, right? Like the challenges. And the way that you treat people, usually either, it's like karma. The way that you treat people, though, can come back to really help you, or it's going to come back to bite you if by nature you just treat people the wrong way. And it feels like he has. But Pat asked an interesting question the other day, my buddy Pat, to me, of how often do we see it where you have two coaches that were that were preseason ranked in the top 10 that are both mid-season fires? And you have it now with Brian Kelly at LSU and then obviously with James Franklin at Penn State. And the reason I bring it up is because it does make you wonder with the coaching carousel now, what does that mean in terms of locally? Cignetti already, and I think he's locked in now, right? We know that. But Marcus Freeman allegedly now has turned down LSU and reportedly has turned down Florida. And the reason being because Notre Dame's a better job than both of those. Just is. Notre Dame might be the number one job in the country. But when you look at Indiana and what Cignetti was able to do at Indiana, for any coach anymore, when you look at an LSU, and I think LSU may have erred here as well. Now, in Brian Kelly's case, I think they just want to get rid of the guy. He lost 3 games. I think he gave them reason to move on from it, partially because he was just pompous to everybody. And in Penn State's case, I think Penn State football has become what Indiana basketball was for a while there, where they just assumed that people would line up to coach there, and it's like, yeah, don't be so sure about it. But for those jobs, are those jobs, did Indiana break the code?
Not just Indiana. You look at, Vanderbilt.
Correct.
And their football success.
Correct.
Georgia Tech, another one.
So
in today's age of college athletics, any Power 4 school can be competitive if you get the right coach,
yes,
that has the right system, and enough NIL money,
And if you are a
and
coach,
build the team the right way.
If you're a coach, you're looking at it and you're going, wait a minute, if I can go win in Bloomington, if I can go win at Vanderbilt, then why do I want the headache and the hassle of a 105,000-seat stadium with 104,000 general managers there that all are convinced they can do the job better than I, that are going to call for my head, and all of the pressures that come with it? It seems like in college football, the Curt Cignetti Indiana experience is a boulder in the stream to the way a ton of things have happened. And in speaking of Indiana football and it being the epicenter of the college football world, there was one person this weekend that is on absolute top zenith, number one, arguably on the planet within their sport, that took in college football really for the first time and did so by watching Indiana and said, this is captivating and I'm all in. And I said, then you got to come on the show and talk about it. And they're going to join us in an hour. you are into the recruiting sort of thing, I admittedly have always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to that, a bit of a cynic when it comes to recruiting, but I know people truly enjoy it. Micah Fleming, who is a corner out of Alabama, a 3-star recruit, just recently posting how much fun he had this weekend at Indiana, but also now, I believe 247 Sports is the one to be presenting this, but LeVar Keys, who is a 3-star, for whatever that's worth, but a top 100 recruit out of DeMatha in Maryland, DeMatha Catholic, one of the huge schools in the country athletically. He was a Penn State commit at wide receiver, apparently now is going to, as the kids call it, flip, and it looks like he would be announcing for Indiana. That's where things stand as of right now for the Hoosiers and Curt Cignetti as they get set to take on, speaking of Maryland, the Maryland Terrapins coming up. That would be this coming Saturday in Maryland. Indiana's scheduled pretty favorably heading down the stretch now between obviously Maryland and then Penn State, Wisconsin, and Purdue to finish things off.
Are you concerned at all moving forward about IU in the fact of, being able to compete following this season when a bunch of those JMU guys that he brought over, like notably Aiden Fisher, for example, D'Angelo Pons, another name, will no longer be on the team? Does that concern you at all?
Not as much as this. This chair is really noisy, by the way. What concerns me for Indiana is the following. Curt Cignetti, if you had to describe Eddie Curt Cignetti, how would you describe him?
I would say he's demanding, but he's also like very
not his style, but how would you describe his persona, his personality? I mean, I guess that's
confident.
Confident, yes.
Cocky.
Google me.
Yeah.
Right? Cocky, yes.
Arrogant.
And
at least publicly, that's how he seems.
That entire MO, when he was at JMU, good buddy of mine, Doug Weiler, native of Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Doug and I met when I was an intern in New York City. I was interning for MTV, and Doug was interning for a company in the World Trade Center, and we lived together in the dorms at NYU during the time that we were in New York City. And Doug went to JMU, and he's a huge James Madison football fan, went to their national title games, all that. And when Cignetti was hired at Indiana, I'm like, so what can you tell me about him? And he's like, dude, he is totally confident, and he is just a great coach because they will be the better prepared team in every game that they play. And part of that, and it wasn't the case at JMU because they would have been playing against other teams of their, in their league, at the same level. But when he came to Indiana a year ago, I think that part of what, and especially bringing all of those players from James Madison that knew his system, that knew what he wanted, that knew what he was all about, it should tell you everything you need to know about the guy, that he had that many players that were willing to step up in terms of the division in which they were playing in a league that is as good as any in college football, and they were willing to make that move and move away from JMU to come to Indiana to go with their coach. So clearly he is a guy that players buy into. But part of what he gets on that buy-in is this. If you look at Indiana's roster, whether you're talking about Surratt, whether you're talking about Omar Cooper, whether you're talking about Aiden Fisher that you just mentioned, for that matter, even Fernando Mendoza. Mendoza was not a blue-chip recruit. I mean, he blue-chip, yes, but he was not a can't miss. This guy is unquestionably a top 10 quarterback recruit level player.
Like DJ Uiagalelei out of high school,
or
Trevor Lawrence,
Justin Fields,
yes,
all those
CJ
guys,
Stroud,
right?
yes.
They're guys that when they come out, you know about them the time that they walk onto campus. And Indiana's roster is made up primarily, and again, I'm not big into the whole recruiting 5-star level thing, because more often than not, I see guys that like it never lives up to it, and then other guys that I go back to this point all the time. The 1990 recruiting class for Indiana, actually 89, recruiting class for Indiana basketball. And I use that example because it's my wheelhouse, number one, but it was a huge class. And you had, I can still tell you who. Lawrence Funderburk, Pat Graham, Greg Graham, Chris Reynolds, Chris Lawson, Calbert Chaney, and Todd Leary. 7 players, 1 class. The highest recruit out of all of them was Lawrence Funderburk, who was a very good player, but he was there for 6 games. The second highest recruit out of all of them was probably Pat Graham. He was a McDonald's All-American. And then the lowest recruit out of all of them was Calbert Chaney, who's the all-time leading scorer in Big Ten history. My point being, recruiting is a crapshoot. However, Indiana's roster from a football standpoint is made up right now largely of guys that buy into Curt Cignetti because, like Curt Cignetti, they are players that have something to prove. They are players that were a little bit overlooked, or people thought they should be playing one rung of the ladder below where they are. And they've completely bought in to what it is that Curt Cignetti is selling and that has worked for them. And they are relishing on defying the odds. They are buying into and getting pumped up for proving people wrong and just maintaining and staying. And now what you're seeing, which I don't know that Curt Cignetti ever had before, even at James Madison. What you are seeing is the recruiting profile escalating for Indiana. And as a result of that, what is going to happen if and when, listen, one thing about Curt Cignetti that I'll give him all the credit in the world, and I think that this will maintain. I think it will maintain. But Cignetti, as I've mentioned before on this show, by all account and people I've talked to, is somebody that if you're going to play football at Indiana, he has watched hours and hours of tape on you. And this is not guys that, I think Bob Knight in his later years at Indiana got in trouble a little bit because he started trusting the recruiting to the wrong people. Or he started just almost assuming that like Indiana was going to sell itself, and he changed and went away from the style of player that had worked for so long at Indiana. Mm-hmm. And if Cignetti is going to go out, one thing that I will say is if, in fact, he is somebody that watches hours upon hours of tape on guys before even deciding if they are a Curt Cignetti-style player, we've seen guys before from a coaching standpoint that have their convictions about the way that they want to play, and then all of a sudden the mystique of the bigger fish starts drawing them away a little bit. And they start buying into, people start saying like, no, you got it. You don't understand. You got to get this guy. Well, I haven't seen a lot of tape on him. No, but you don't understand. He can do this, he can do that, he can do this, he can do that. And you get away a little bit from your roots on it. And I'm very curious to see, Eddie, what happens with Indiana, because it's inevitably going to happen when you are arguably the best team in college football, when you are going to be in the playoff for the second year in a row, when you are going to play, and I think they are. I really do believe Indiana's going to play for a national championship. I really, truly believe that. If that happens, then all of a sudden you start getting into a completely different stratosphere of player that wants to come to Indiana. And I hope that Cignetti stays true to his roots and rooting those things out and weeding those things out and vetting those that may have every gift that God can give to a football player, but they got a little bit of knucklehead in them. Or they don't have, more importantly, that chip on their shoulder that Cignetti relishes in and taps into. I think he taps into players that drive and desire that comes from proving people wrong. And when you start getting into players that are naturally gifted, that have been coddled since 7th or 8th grade, they don't have that chip because they've never had any reason for it.
I go back to his day. The reason why I'm not concerned at all, Jake, about moving forward and Kurt Signetti being able to either attract, high school kids to come to Indiana or in the portal like he's been doing so far through the first 2 seasons with the Hoosiers is the fact that of his time with Alabama underneath Nick Saban. And I feel like that has a lot to do with how he approaches things and the way that he goes about his business, because you learn from one of the best college football coaches of all time, and you're aiding him in what he wants during the time in the heyday of which Alabama football was the creme de la creme. So he understands how to recruit, how to retain, how to replenish talent, and how to keep the program continuing year after year after year for sustained success.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. The Alabama thing's a very good point.
No, because he was the recruiting coordinator there.
Right. That's a very good point. But then, once he was the guy going out and shopping for it, but he wasn't necessarily then cooking the meal, right?
Right. He was the one that was going out and doing all the research for these guys to figure out who
works and who doesn't,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
And then hey, Coach Saban, can you come close the deal? I think this guy would be really good for us.
What level recruit were you in baseball?
Excuse me?
Were you recruited for baseball?
No.
What is the area where you what is the time in your life or skill that you possess where you have felt the most coveted?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Because I can't imagine what it would be like, surreal and bizarre for sure. College athletics fascinates me, and high school athletics fascinate me for this reason. When I was in high school, and I think a lot of guys are like this, and I'll admit it. I mean, I totally admit this. I played sports and I was around it, and I certainly had buddies that were far better players than I, but I really wanted to be, I was on the periphery of greatness.
Yeah.
Okay? I was on a team that started out 20-0 and was beating everybody by literally 30 points. And we knew we were really good. And we knew when we went to other schools and got off the bus that people were like, man, this is like, the Beatles showing up. Now, it was Greg Black and Dewey Williams and Cameron McDaniel and Wesley Rayner and Matt Klein that were doing that, and I just happened to be on the roster, right? But I was within the periphery of greatness. And then as we got older, there were guys that and I was doing, Adam Alexander and Mac Engel and myself were the 3 guys doing play-by-play broadcasting on the radio station for football and basketball.
And fake Indy 500 broadcasts as well.
And fake Indy 500 broadcasts, yes.
With Jason Venturi.
That is correct. Playing the keyboards, right?
Yeah.
Again, Venturi, very good football player. His dad was a coach for the Colts. I was within the periphery of greatness, right? But I didn't personally have it or feel it. But
you're with greatness right now every day.
Okay.
Noon to 3 right here.
And, my buddy Dewey was going to 5-star basketball camp. And, I had gone to elementary school with Allen Henderson and all those things. But not me. But even then, I was fascinated by and really wanted to be a somebody. Admittedly, I wanted to be a somebody. And like most kids, right? I think most guys, when you're younger, that's the case. So for those that are, and I mean, I was around well before the Rivals, 247 Sports, ESPN.com recruiting rankings. I mean, we knew. I went to high school with Derek Mays, who was a wide receiver at Notre Dame. We knew that he was a great player because he was, looking at Penn State, Alabama, and Notre Dame. So you're like, well, he must be pretty good. But it was a different era. You didn't have the lights and the glitz and the glamour. You had Scholastic Sports America doing a thing on Saturday mornings. That was it. But my long-winded point here is even I fell a little bit victim to being within the periphery of greatness. So I can't imagine how it would impact you to be that at that age. And one of the things that I think is impossible to gauge is what happens when a young person at that age has all of that. In fact, and greatness is already attached to them at 16 or 17, and then they are expected automatically to carry it on at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. It's a huge burden and responsibility and challenge, and it doesn't necessarily translate for every kid. And then, so what happens once you get to Indiana and Curt Cignetti or Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman or, any of the different places that guys can go and play? And I think it's one of the most inexact sciences in sports is that of recruiting, because the element that you can never factor in is how a person matures. In my case, it was weird because I so badly wanted to be a somebody at that age, and then by the time I was probably, and it took a while, but by the time I was 25 or 28, like being a somebody was the last thing on my mind. And I'm not saying I am, but I'm saying like I think a lot of things start coming to you once you quit worrying about it, just success or path in general. But young people, when they are being recruited, it is so invested in them to never quit that pursuit.
Yeah.
That then what happens? It goes back to, did you ever see the movie, Eddie? It's a documentary, Hoop Dreams.
No.
Hoop Dreams it should be required viewing. It should be required viewing for young people. Hoop Dreams is about Arthur Agee and William Gates, I believe is his last name. And they were two top 100 recruits, just so happened to be in my senior year of high school. But the documentary came out in the mid-'90s. They followed these two players, Arthur Agee and William Gates, who were inner-city Chicago kids. They followed them from the time they were freshmen through senior year of high school. Literally followed everything about them. The recruiting process that William Gates ends up transferring from an inner-city school to St. Joseph's out in Westchester, Illinois, which is where Isaiah Thomas and Darryl Thomas had gone. Arthur Agee went through the Chicago public school system. They were contemporaries of one another and played against one another, and then Gates kind of goes one direction in terms of their schooling career, and Agee stays in the Chicago public city schools. And they were big-time recruits. And there's a line in that movie that I have never forgotten where William Gates, and it's at the end of the documentary, where he says, and he ended up going to Marquette, had knee injuries, and was an okay player. Arthur Agee went to Arkansas State. But William Gates says, and this is a young man at 18 years old that had this sort of epiphany. And he says, and I think it's a great lesson for everybody to think about. But he said, every day, teachers, coaches, teammates, their parents, they all say the same thing to me. It became a patented line because he was a top-level, top point guard in America as a high schooler. And he said, everybody says to me, don't forget about me when you get to the NBA. And he said, and I always want to say back to them, don't forget about me if I don't. Don't forget about me if you get to the NBA. And he said, and I always want to say to them, don't forget about me if I don't. And I think that pursuit for so many young people, we put such an emphasis on it. You're a 5-star recruit. You're destined for greatness at this school, that school, this school, that school. And guys get there, and then if it doesn't happen to them right away because they've been conditioned and ingrained and raised to believe that it's a fait accompli that they're going to have greatness, and then they fall into the periphery of greatness. And at that point then, what is going to be the internal response? And it takes a great coach like a Curt Cignetti, perhaps, we'll see, to be able to continue to push those buttons that when guys, in fact, are not going to be the guy all the way through, that they still find greatness within them to contribute to a great team, even if they are not the one getting the limelight. And there are other guys like a Brian Kelly that I truly think what happens is players feel like that guy is, in fact, because the greatness isn't coming out of them in terms of the individualized effort, then they feel like that coach dispatches them immediately and moves on, and then they just kind of sulk in a corner, and it brings everything down. And there's such a fine balance there between those two things. I think it's one of the fascinating things to see about the recruiting game, the analysis, and also the one thing that is almost impossible to predict, and that is the mental fortitude of how somebody responds when they have to back down into the periphery. And in the case of Indiana's recruiting profile, you raise an excellent point there, Eddie, and that is that Curt Cignetti has already been exposed to those players. At Alabama, he was if he's recruiting for Alabama, he is dropping his line in the water of a totally different fish than that at James Madison. And it's interesting that at James Madison, he's able to get those fish to swim in the pond with him in Bloomington. But can he now get those fish to swim in Bloomington when he's now going and getting them out of the same pond as Alabama? And to your point, one would hope that the answer to that is going to be yes because of the experience he has thereof. Stephen Holder, ESPN.com. Colts trade deadline a week from today. Might we see some movement? We'll find out next. Aired, and it's 100% on me. I told you earlier. It's a sleep deprivation Tuesday. Not to make excuse, simply explanation. But of course, as a diehard 8 weeks into it now, about to turn week 9, fan of the Toronto Blue Jays, I was up until the wee hours of the morning watching the 18-inning marathon that was Game 3 of the World Series. As I mentioned, the Blue Jays themselves aired last night by getting too aggressive, not once but twice on the base paths. But that's what happens when teams force you, like the Dodgers with that offense and Ohtani in particular. You get aggressive because you are terrified of the fact that that is an offensive explosion in LA's case that can happen at any time. So you're trying to get that one run, that elusive run, to close things. And it did in the Blue Jays last night. I ended up watching it for 18 innings. I was up late, and so my apologies that I aired. Stephen Holder actually is at 2:15, and Scott Agnes joins us now from Fieldhouse Files talking about the Pacers, who a year ago forced teams to play their pace. Indiana would go in, and teams, I think, would end up taking bad shots and forcing themselves offensively because they knew that the Pacers were a team that could explode at any time, and they could start hitting threes, and that kept teams off kilter. Now, Scott Agnes' question becomes for Indiana. It's not even a matter of running the same pace as a year ago, but simply at this point finding bodies, because we now know that Mac McClung is in, the former dunk champion. Rick Carlisle had said that it is offensively a skill set that is more intriguing to them than dunks. They think that he can score. But James Weissman and the release thereof to make room for that was intriguing to me. Were you surprised, first off, that that's where they made the roster space?
Yeah, good afternoon, Jake. I was not entirely surprised, only because he had seemed to produce very little during his minutes out there. It felt like something was off over the weekend when he started in Memphis. I know it was a kind of a fun reunion game. He graduated from school there and then went to University of Memphis, but he showed nothing in 20 minutes. It felt like that was, hey, here's your last try. Let's see what you can do. And he didn't show much. So the only surprise, I guess, would be because he's the one player on this roster. Tony Bradley was the one player on this roster with non-guaranteed deal. So they had to eat $1 million of his contract to part ways with him. But it made all the sense in the world. They need help at guard.
Yeah, and let's go back to that. Needing help at guard when you look at it, okay? Tyrese Halliburton obviously out for the year. Andrew Nembhard is out. T.J. McConnell is out. In Nembhard's case, it's a shoulder sprain. McConnell's case, I believe that's hamstring, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Even that, Talon Peter, for example, is nursing. I think it's a groin injury. Where do you, when you look at timetable, Scott? I guess a two-part question. The first is, when do you believe they will have full arsenal back? And the second is, do you think, knowing all that goes into this year anyway, that they don't get over-aggressive in when they bring people back?
Yeah, so first of all, I wouldn't expect a handful of those back until mid-November. So I think best case scenario, Jake, would be mid-November that all but Halliburton could potentially be available. Already, the only timeline we know for certain is that Cam Jones, the rookie, is dealing with a stress reaction in his back. He's out until then, and the same thing with T.J. McConnell's hamstring strain. They did get Quentin Jackson back over the weekend, which I would color that a little bit as a surprise, given it was a hamstring strain, and he didn't miss more time. But look, you got 8 guys on the injury report. Obi Toppin was the newest addition over this past game, and so it's gotten to the point they're going to continue to, I believe, Jake, play their style, that pace, the randomness, the chaotic style, but who brings it up is obviously one of the biggest concerns, and you're going to see, and we have seen Pascal Siakam have to take on an entire new workload. Now, in terms of your second question is, do you take it slow or be overly cautious? I think you do to a certain extent, but only from the level of like hamstring strains. You don't want to linger or anything like that. I don't think you're doing it in the broader context of this season, given what it could be on a worst case scenario, because this team's sole focus is getting back to the playoffs and having that. And remember, last season they got off to an awful start the first 6 weeks, and so maybe it's just replicating what happened last year, and you hope they can find some good out of all this.
Scott, after tomorrow's game against Dallas, are the Pacers now eligible to sign someone to a hardship deal?
Yeah, great question, Eddie. Yeah, the hardship would be available after the third game because it requires 4 players to be out at least 3 games and miss at least the next 2 weeks. And so, in all likelihood, you already have 3 for certain with Tyrese, with Cam Jones, and TJ McConnell. And then, Andrew Nembhard could be a candidate for that. We did see Johnny Furphy play briefly in the second game, I think it was. So it doesn't seem like he's another 2 weeks away there. But I all along, I was expecting the Pacers to make a move midweek this week to take advantage of that hardship exception and become the second team. We've seen the Memphis Grizzlies already do so.
Same for Benedict Mathurin, by the way. He after Wednesday's game, he would fall into that category, right, Scott, with Johnny Furphy?
No, because he's been playing.
Friday's game then.
After he has missed 3 games.
Yep.
So it would be after Saturday's game, assuming he misses here time. They have not put a timetable on it. I have not gotten updates from his tests. He was scheduled to get some tests on Sunday and Monday, and determined based off those, we'll see on the injury report coming up at 5 o'clock, I think, tonight.
But by the way, Scott, were you up late watching the World Series by any chance?
I gave up after like the 10th inning, something like that. I'm not a baseball guy anyway. That was the first baseball I had watched all year.
Your voice sounds deeper this morning. Are you getting enough sleep?
That's never the case.
Did you hit puberty at like 2 a.m? Your voice sounds. Is it just me, Eddie, or does his voice sound deeper?
I think it's just you.
A little more bass in the voice. I don't mean that in a bad way, Scott. I'm just saying, like,
No,
sometimes,
I'll take it.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a very dulcet tone. I'm going to give you 2 players. I want you to give me your critique on where you think, how they're playing so far this year, albeit through just, less than a handful of games. Jarris Walker.
I would say C, kind of average, slightly below average. To this point, I would expect more, but yeah, we're just a weekend.
Do you think they would tell you the same thing in terms of expect more?
I would say so, absolutely, especially from a general sense here, Jake, because everybody's got to give them more just because of all the different injuries we talked about. And so even if they were at full health and he was out there, I would have expected a little bit more. I think it was the first game where he played well and kind of showed some bright spots, but very non-memorable performances the last couple, I think.
Ben Shepherd.
I'd say about what we expected. Especially, here's the other thing: he's not 100%,
right?
And so he's playing through.
He strikes
a calf
me
strain,
though. Shepherd. This is kind of the case with everybody, but it seems to me that Ben Shepherd has been asked to play a little more out of natural position.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, he was brought in and drafted for his defense, for his 3-point shooting, and he's having to communicate out there and lead in addition to kind of running some point and bringing the ball up a lot more. So, yeah, I would say he's done above what I would expected, especially due to the injury that cost him all of training camp, basically.
What player would you say? Scott Agnes is our guest, Fieldhouse Files. He's on the Java House Peel and Pork guest line. JavaHouse.com, Jake25, the code, by the way, for 25% off. What player would you say, Scott, so far for the Indiana Pacers, based on the injury attrition, is the one that has had to play the most, and maybe even most successfully played above and beyond their normal place they would slot?
I'm going to go Pascal Siakam. He is doing so much that from the long term for this season, Jake, I'm a little bit worried, right? Like he's overexerting himself and having to lead and produce and score and defend and bring the ball up. And I wonder if that is sustainable. So while he is the best player available right now on this team and the top scorer this past season, to me, he's the guy that has elevated his job even more so. And that's why they've been able to stay in some of these games.
And you mentioned James Weissman, Scott Agnes, our guest. I hate to say this, Scott, because I love him, and I know it's so early. I mean, it almost feels silly to go there with this, but because it's so early. I've wanted to see anything out of Isaiah Jackson, and I haven't seen it yet. Tell me I'm too critical.
No, I would agree with that. Again, very early, but still, the biggest concern for me, Jake, in all this has been the foul trouble. 2 of the 3 games, he's had 4+ fouls, playing less than 15 minutes per game. We saw in the preseason how that was obviously an issue in all but one of those games. And so that's where it starts with him for me, because he should be able to give them 20 minutes per game. And I would say that whole center position has been wholly underwhelming to me, outside of maybe a brief stint this past game in Minnesota with Tony Bradley. And that's why I think they ultimately said, hey, look, it's kind of a wash right now what we're getting at this center spot, but we badly need help at that guard spot. So let's make a move, and Wiseman clearly has been the one that has shown them the least. And so it was a worthwhile experiment, I think. But unfortunately, he was here just 1 year, played just 2 games and 25 minutes, and he made out nicely with the contract. But I think that was a worthwhile gamble for this franchise.
Okay, Scott, here's how we're going to do this. I'm looking right now. I got on the Pacers website, and there's an ad on here for a mini-game package that you can buy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The gold plan and the blue plan. Now, I'm going to read you the 2 plans. I want you to tell me, Scott Agnes, if I was going to buy them for you, which of the 2 plans you would take, which one you think is the better option in terms of your viewing pleasure. And then Eddie's going to get the one you don't pick, and we're going to see whether Eddie is happy or unhappy with that, okay?
Okay.
The blue plan allows you to go see the Golden State Warriors, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics, the Memphis Grizzlies, the LA Clippers, and the Philadelphia 76ers. Those are the games that you would get with the blue plan. The gold plan means that you would go see the Pacers play Oklahoma City, Milwaukee, the New York Knicks, the Cavs, the Rockets, and the LA Lakers.
Before I answer this, from your standpoint, is it even close?
I don't believe it is.
Me neither. It's gold all day.
Eddie, would you be happy with that?
I'd be happy with attending any game, Jake. I don't care who the opponent is.
Yeah, gold.
Me too, Eddie.
Gold seems the better because you well, here's the thing. You're a little late on the gold plan because Oklahoma City's already been here, right?
Even then, though, the other 5 games are nice. Milwaukee crosses both, so you're good there. You're facing 2 of your last opponents in the playoffs.
Correct.
Rockets could be one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah.
And Lakers, you're taking a gamble because that's the end of the season. You never know with health and what they're looking like. But between LeBron and Luka and the potential even resale value, say you don't even care about those 2, that's a high mark.
Yeah. The Blues not bad. I mean, you get Steph, right? You get Milwaukee again, as you mentioned. Boston is still Boston. The Grizzlies, I guess, Ja Morant, right? Clippers doesn't do much for me, and the Sixers.
It might be Zach Edey for Memphis for some of these fans.
Yeah, true.
But he's out right now with injury. And same thing with Boston.
Clippers and Sixers
Tatum.
don't do much for me, right? I mean, I know
Totally.
the Sixers are going to be good, but they don't do much for me.
Either one, you never know who's going to be available on the given night, and that's the challenge, right? If 76ers, it was Embiid, Paul George, Eric Gordon, for certain, sure, that's a little bit intriguing, but those guys missing out a lot. So you're certain about like Tyrese Maxey. And then the Clippers, what? Kyrie and the opportunity to chance some things at the Clippers? That'd probably be about it, right?
Yeah, I mean the Clippers, the Clippers to me, the Clippers and Sixers both. To me, the Clippers are the Sixers of the West, right? Like they've had all the talent over the course of the years, and you just keep, you're like, what's happened here, right?
Absolutely.
For what that's worth. All right, it is Pacers and Mavs tomorrow night in Dallas. Scott Agnes will have all of the coverage, Fieldhouse Files. He has been our guest on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. I meant as a compliment about your voice, by the way. It's got a little bass to it this morning.
I took it that way as well. Maybe it was the morning coffee or something. I don't know.
I hope it's from Java House. All right, Scott, appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Scott Agnes joining us on the guest line. As I mentioned, Stephen Holder, I aired on that. That's 30 minutes from now. Colts deadline talk. They're going to make a move. Holder's been busy. We'll find out. Eddie, how well do you know this song?
What do you mean?
I mean, the words, the etc.
I mean, probably 75%.
True or false? In Billie Jean, true or false? Michael Jackson is the father of Billie Jean's child.
I don't know.
Billie Jean is not
Right.
my lover. She's just a girl who claims that I'm the one, but the kid is not my son, right?
Right.
The most underrated aspect of that, underrated is the wrong word, overlooked aspect of that song that people don't pay attention to is at the end, he essentially confesses because he says, Billie Jean showed a photo to my baby, presumably meaning his girlfriend, and my baby cried because his eyes were like mine because we danced on the floor in the round. Thus, he, at the end, subtly confesses that, yes, in fact, Billie Jean was the affair that he had. Anyway, that's more info than anybody needed to know. There is rumor that now with Brian Kelly being fired at LSU, not to sit here and talk about Brian Kelly and LSU all day, but does have implication, as I mentioned earlier, potentially within the Big Ten. Did you see who the latest in the coaching carousel rumor is to potentially land in Baton Rouge?
I have not seen this.
That would be none other than and I'm hoping I say his last name correctly here because I have a mental block with this one from time to time. Dan Lemming at Oregon, right?
Dan Lanning?
Lanning, thank you. See, like I told you, I have a mental block with it. I don't know who I'm thinking of with Lemming. I always think Lemming.
Tom Lemming?
But who was it? Who did he replace at Oregon?
Was it Chip Kelly? It wasn't Chip Kelly, was it?
It might be. That might be right, yeah. I mean, Oregon's obviously had, in the last 15 years, kind of, they've been able to just kind of plug and play with coaches. But that would leave a vacancy at Oregon. Oregon, to me, is an interesting one because they are in the upper echelon of the Big Ten. I think that we could easily say that.
Ooh, wrong.
Hold on. Let me. I know this, right?
So it was Chip Kelly. Then it was Mark Helfrich, Willie Taggart, this coach, interim for one season, or for one game, I should say. The interim was Brian McClendon. Because this
where
coach.
Did Taggart go? Did Taggart go to Florida State? Am I wrong in that?
Taggart was at Oregon for 1 year,
right? Because
he went to Florida State.
Okay, yeah, that's right. And who was before him?
Mark Helfrich.
And where did he go?
Let me pull up his coaching card here, and then I can answer that question. By the way, he was the quarterbacks coach at Ball State from 98 to 2000. He went from, let's see, I can't even find it. Oregon to Chicago Bears as their offensive coordinator.
Gotcha. Okay.
From 2018 to 2019.
But Oregon, when you think about the Big Ten and the power shift of the Big Ten, you obviously have Ohio State, and they ain't going anywhere. I think we could safely say that Michigan, even though we'll see what happens with just Michigan in general. But
by the way, you didn't guess the coach that he replaced.
What's that?
You didn't guess the coach that he replaced. Dan Lanning.
But you said it was just a one-game interim, right?
Because this coach left Oregon for another school.
So this is not the interim. This is...
The interim coach coached the bowl game because the head coach left.
Right. Okay. So
another college school.
And you're asking me for the head coach, right?
And this coach is
I know this. Hold on.
I believe they're in the top 10 right now. I'm almost confident they are in the top 10 right now.
I know this because it was a big deal when he left, right? People are screaming at the radio right now. They're like, dude, how do you not know this?
And this season was arguably a year in which he needed to get this school on track, or he was probably among the list of coaches that was going to be fired.
Okay, it's not Kyle DeBoer because he was at Washington, right?
Correct, not Kalen.
Okay, let's see again. Can you tell it's a sleep deprivation Tuesday?
Oh, yeah.
It's not Lane Kiffin, right, at Ole Miss because he had been at Tennessee and amongst other places, right? Oh, wait, but who's at A&M?
It is not Elko. It is not Mike Elko.
Okay. Cristobal's Miami, right?
Bingo.
Is that who it is?
Yes.
I don't remember him being in Oregon.
Yeah, Mario Cristobal was there from 2017 to 2021.
Boy, I do not remember that.
Brian McClendon was the interim coach for one game for Oregon.
So, but Oregon, Ohio State and Michigan are always going to be the in terms of traditional Big Ten power. There you go, right? Indiana has arrived in that discussion and is right there in the party. The question then becomes, if Oregon, and I don't know that this is going to be the case, but if Oregon again has to go back into the coaching, search, Oregon, because of the Nike money and the cachet of Oregon, one would assume is going to be there for a while. But, can they go through it again?
Lanning's buyout is around $20 million, reportedly.
That's nothing, though.
Yeah, but you already paid, what was it?
$52 million to Brian Kelly, right?
Exactly.
I mean, just when you're talking, so $72 million. I'm telling you, the boosters and the alum and the fan base of an LSU. One of the advantages that LSU has. Yes, I know, and the Saints are a huge deal, and they're a regional deal. But to a big extent, LSU is the bigger job in Louisiana than even New Orleans. Like that's the bigger program. You know what I mean? Like that is for most of the state, that is their pro team, and you get boosters and money coming all over the place. I had mentioned that Indiana had somebody that is at the very top of his game that was there watching the Hoosiers over the weekend. He is set to join us just a couple minutes. And Stephen Holder about 18 minutes from now. Hour in Indianapolis. For that matter, it's the 2 o'clock hour everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program. We call it Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. We've been talking a lot about, of course, with this being football season, the Colts, the best team in the NFL. Indiana is now primed and hoping to put themselves in position to land a top 2 spot in the college football playoff. And when you want to win and you want to have greatness, why not have on your sideline somebody that knows a little about both? He is the 4-time champion of the IndyCar Series, the reigning Indy 500 champion. And he was wearing his Indiana Hoosiers jersey on the sidelines. Alex Pillow is now an official Hoosier, and he joins us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Alex, how are you?
I'm great. I am the biggest Hoosier now. Number one.
Listen, I want to get to this. There's a couple of things I want to talk to you about with this because I love, I'm here for it, as the kids say. The first is, and be honest, you grew up just outside of Barcelona, Spain. I would imagine that American football would not be amongst the top sports of interest from a spectating standpoint during your childhood. When did you become a football fan, or is this still a work in progress?
You're right. I mean, honestly, I didn't even know it existed when I was a kid. That's when I was like a young kid in school. I only knew about basketball, soccer. Soccer is the main. 99% of people in Spain play soccer. I found out, obviously, when I was growing up and I had access to internet and TV. But I did not understand the game, and I did not understand the game for the first 2-3 years that I was here in the U.S. But then started getting to the games at the Colts, started getting into it. Colts started to get really, really good and started to get fun, and I started getting interested. So I would say the last 3 years I've been following and learning, but especially this year. This year it's been amazing.
Okay, so you have been to, and I know you were at a Colts game because they did one time the like celebrity lookalike thing, and then they actually show you in the crowd and everybody cheers, right? And then this weekend you were at Indiana, and you were there on the sidelines for Indiana's really, blowout win of UCLA. Do you have, or have you noticed at all, a difference between the pro game and the college game? Which one you found yourself more liking?
Yeah, so I had no idea that college football was so big. So I'm not used to it. In Spain, college and sports, they don't go together like here in the US, which I think it's amazing that you have that opportunity to do both at the same time and do both at the highest level. But so I went to the game with expectations, basically because my neighbor got me into watching IU on Saturdays the past 3 weeks, and he's a big fan. So I already knew a little bit, but honestly, the experience, the event, the atmosphere was 10 times better than I thought that it was going to be. I had so much fun. The game was super fast. I just felt like there was a lot more plays that I did not expect, or you would see, just a lot more action than at some Colts games. So I really liked it. I had the best time. I think I was at the game that was probably one of the best, with the margins that we won, with how good the team was playing and all the fans, how excited they were. But yeah, I just had the best Saturday, honestly.
So here's what's funny. I was talking to a buddy of mine that was kind of I don't know if I would say your host, but a guy that I grew up around. Jeremy Gray is his name, and he works for IU. And his wife had lived in Barcelona, and I think was maybe talking to your wife a little bit. And Jeremy told me that at one point during the game that you said, like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically you said, I feel kind of bad for these UCLA guys. And Jeremy said, yeah, but I mean, do you feel bad when you've led if you're leading the field by 2 laps? And Jeremy said that you said, well, yeah, but I mean, I'm not hurting those guys. like Indiana's hurting these guys, right? It's a collision sport, right? I mean, you had to have, so up close and up personal. Is that a true recount of what your emotion was watching that?
Yeah, it was, and it was very fun. And I mean, when they were playing so good, it just felt like we were able to move the ball wherever we wanted. We were able to get touchdowns almost every time, and UCLA wasn't able to. So I just, I was laughing a little bit and being a bit funny. But I mean, these guys are crazy, all of them. Like they have a lot of contact. Like they get 250 pounds of people on top of them, and they stand up again in like 2 seconds, and they are ready to go again. And I just feel like it's so hard to do that. Like I would not be able to do that if I get somebody hitting me or trying to get me to the ground that fast. So yeah.
Alex, I don't know if anybody's told you this or not, but you drive 238 miles an hour, 8 inches from a concrete wall. You know that, right?
Okay, but that's not the same. I don't have somebody trying to kill me because I'm carrying a football. I got that. Yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating. I think I am very lucky to do what I do. I have people trying to chase me, or I'm trying to chase people, but when I get there, I pass them and on a polite way, and it's not like football. But honestly, it's amazing. It's amazing to see the game, and once you understand it, once you're able to cheer for teams like the IU or the Colts that are doing so amazing this year, it just makes it so fun to be part of.
Alex Palou is my guest on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Of course, Palou driving car number 10 for Chip Ganassi Racing and the reigning Indy 500 winner and IndyCar champion. Alex, when you won the 500, you came to the Pacer game. It was pretty awesome. You still had the wreath on. Some of the flowers were off of it. We talked, shortly after that. But I'm curious of this. You grew up in one of the most beautiful regions of the world, outside of Barcelona, and I've been there, and it's absolutely gorgeous. The people are fascinating and awesome and fun. And yet you come to Indianapolis, and you have really seemingly in the last year, maybe even last 6 months, really dove into the culture here, going to the games, being a part of it, soaking in the Pacer games, and really doing anything that's asked in terms of going out and just trying to grow the sport and grow, your name in general. Why is that? Why do you feel the obligation to do all of those things and soak it all in?
I would say it's been before that. Like and it's not an obligation. I push for it. Like I push to try and get to the Pacer games or to the Colts or to the IU. Honestly, it was they just told me if I wanted, and I was like, absolutely. But it's not an obligation for me. It's a privilege that I get to do these things. I've been going, I would say, at least twice a year for the past years, but this year already been to like 3 Colts games, to like 1 IU, not to the Pacers yet for this season. But I love it. I feel that the city has welcomed me, and they give me the opportunity to be part of. And I love Barcelona. I love Spain. I know that's always going to be there for me, and I grew up there, and I have a lot of love for it. But this is my home now. Like this is where I'm having I got my first house here. I am spending my time with my wife, my daughter, and this is our home now. So I don't know if it's going to be for the next 50 years or 25, but this is our home, and I'm just enjoying it as much as possible. And it's been super easy. It's been super easy because the city has been welcoming us super happily. So, yeah, it's been fun.
Okay, lastly, when you drive I'm curious of this. I drive past the Speedway fairly often. I mean, sometimes by intent, and sometimes I just happen to be on the west side and I drive past it. And, every once in a while I just stop and I look at the size of the venue. And, you can go past Lucas Oil Stadium, you can go past Gainbridge Fieldhouse, you can go past Memorial Stadium in Bloomington and see and think like, wow, like big games take place there. Has it sunk into you? Do you grasp it when you drive past the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and think to yourself, currently I own that place?
Maybe not in that phrase, but I every time I'm there, I'm like, man, I cannot wait for May to have people, because I think that's like all events, but especially the 500, what makes it feel so big and so good. It's whenever you see so many fans and the atmosphere they bring. So I cannot wait to be the winner. But once the people are in, and once you see people that they want to take a picture with you, and they give you all that good energy because you just won 11 or 12 months ago. So I cannot wait for May, honestly, and to celebrate my first May, or race my first Indy 500 as a winner now.
What makes you nervous? Anything?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that makes me nervous, like what I'm gonna eat for dinner, my wife, if I've done something wrong. There's a lot of stuff.
what I'm going to eat for dinner? The trials, and well, I hate to say trials. That's probably the wrong word to say there, Alex. Right? We know that there's that going on, and that seemingly you've been able to stay focused with all of that. And I guess lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't ask. In terms of the trial with the contract stuff, that has seemingly never bothered you, and I don't even know, so pardon my ignorance on asking this. Do we know when we get a resolution with all of that?
It's still ongoing, but I would say beginning of next year. I still don't really know. So I've spent some time in the UK. I wouldn't say that it doesn't bother me. It does. I mean, it's important. But I mean, when it comes to racing, at the end of the day, my job is just to drive a racing car as fast as I can and deliver results. So yeah, that's not been taking, let's say, performance out of it. So yeah, I mean, hopefully it's solved as soon as possible so we can get that behind. But it's been good now going into trial and tell our story for the first time, instead of always saying that I couldn't really comment. So yeah, I cannot really wait until it's over and it's solved, and we can get that behind us.
So you are officially now a Hoosier. So, and look, there's people
100%.
around here, like people around here, they're like, look, IU, Purdue, it's a big rivalry. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. You loved your time at IU, but you're a Purdue fan as well, right?
I am not really going to comment on that because I've never been to Purdue. So
we'll have to get you to Purdue next, right?
I guess I'll need to see, and then I can compare. Yes, I would say that. Yes, absolutely.
Lots of engineers at Purdue, so you probably can relate to a lot of them. Alex, I'm glad you had a good time down there, man, and you did a great job representing the series and representing just your team and all of it, and it looked like you had a lot of fun, so I'm certainly appreciative of your time today and sharing in the fun, and we'll see if we can get you out to a Colts game as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, Alex Pillow joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. And for those that are unfamiliar, the lawsuit of which I spoke is simply the fact that he had signed a contract with McLaren Racing, and then turns out that he still had time left on his contract with Ganassi Racing, and then there were contractual legalities back and forth that has led him to court over in England with McLaren and figuring out where all of that shakes out. And again, he has been completely unflappable in that regard. And super nice guy. And Indiana, I think, really enjoyed having him down there. I do know that from the IU standpoint. And then having, the milk chugging contest on Fox and everything that goes into it, represented himself extremely, extremely well. Joining us now on the program, he is with ESPN.com. He is, of course, the Colts beat writer, and it is a week from today that the trade deadline hits, and I'm talking about Stephen Holder, who joins us on the program. Stephen, let's get right to that meat of the matter, and that is, do you anticipate within the next week that something will happen with the Colts in terms of Chris Ballard trying to get more talent on this roster?
I think it's possible. I mean, not a definitive answer, obviously, but I think they are looking. Okay, now what does that mean? They're looking for something that makes a tangible difference. I mean, I think they have a lot of talent. If they're going to make a move, it has to be something substantive that is going to move the needle, and that's kind of where I think they are. I mean, you're not making a deal just for the sake of making a deal. And I will say what I have consistently said. It is not their way to make a splash at the trade deadline. That is the most Chris Ballard-like thing, right? But I really believe this is a different year. If they keep this up, they're the number one seed in the AFC. All right? What more motivation do you need to do something different than you might otherwise do. Now, that being said, okay, let's remember these things tend to disappoint, right? These situations, the NFL trade deadline, it is not MLB, it is not the NBA. They're usually much less interesting. But again, we're talking about the Colts, and in their situation, I do think there is motivation to do something. So I'm more invested in paying attention to this than usual. I will say that.
Stephen, here's a weird angle on this, okay? Oftentimes, I think sometimes defensively speaking, so it's very easy for us to sit here and say the Colts need help with their pass rush. I get it. Or their defensive backfield that has been, really hurt by injury. I get it. And I'm going to go back to, and I do reference this a lot, but I use it as my baseline. In talking to Bill Polian when those teams were built, and they went out and got Freeney and Mathis on the edges because they knew that for 3/4 of every game, the likelihood was that teams were going to have to be throwing the football to keep up with the high-flying offense that Peyton Manning had. And that gave the Colts the ability to basically know exactly what they were facing game in and game out from a defensive standpoint. Does it temper a little bit the need, and I get it, the fact that this means teams are going to have to throw if this offense continues to play at this level, but does it in any way, shape, or form temper Chris Ballard's feeling of necessity of going out and bolstering a defense if he knows he's got an offense averaging 31 a game? Or is that a fool's gold to buy into that?
Well, I do think I will say this: the performance of the offense is going to lead to some skewed numbers on defense. So let's look at it. For example, I'm looking at it right now. The Colts, they are 24th in defensive yards per game. So the number of yards per game they allow, they are 24th, 345 yards. Now, if you look at, for example, an efficiency rating, which is, for example, expected points added. Don't worry about what it means, but it measures defensive efficiency. They're 13th, right? So what this says is that overall you're getting the job done. It's better than average. I think the question is, we got to look at it this way. What question are we asking? Are we asking, is it good enough, or are we asking, is it Super Bowl caliber? And I think those are different questions. So I don't know what question Chris Ballard is asking, but I think those are the two different questions. The question isn't like, can we get by? They can get by with this defense because their offense, in part because their offense is so good and is scoring so many points. And I don't see that changing substantially, okay? I think they may take a slight downturn because of the defenses they face coming up, but I don't think their offense is going to fall apart. So they'll get that. The question is, though, is their defense enough to do whatever their goals are now, which, frankly, the goals should be to win it all. Whether we think that's realistic or not, that should be the goal right now. So if that makes sense, I think it's a matter of the question, not necessarily where they are at the moment.
Stephen, I keep going back to this. When I think about the Colts and, can they win it all? And in the back of my mind, I keep thinking to myself, well, the Colts are not the best team in the league. And then I think, but if they're not, who is? I mean, who is? Like,
right.
The Colts haven't played anybody. Okay, as I keep saying, if the Colts haven't played anybody, that's fine. Then who is somebody? And that's my question. Who is the somebody?
Well, a lot of those somebodies, quote unquote, have 2 and 3 and 4 losses.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I would say that the NFL this year is one of those years where the projections are always wrong. Okay, let me be clear. As someone, and you as well, as people who are in this business, this line of work, we're very used to being wrong, okay? And it's okay. I've come to terms with that. We don't know a lot before the season starts. But this year, more than most, we have been, and not just us, but everybody, has been far more wrong than usual, all right? And look, are the Kansas City Chiefs getting it together? Yes, and I think they're going to be a problem, right? But let's talk about, for example, I don't know, the Buffalo Bills. Are you scared of the Buffalo Bills right now? You know what I mean? Like a team like that, for example, right? So I just think there's a lot of that. And then you look at New England, like all of a sudden New England's a team like, oh, wait a minute. Wait, they have sort of a semi-juggernaut on offense, and now we got to pay attention to them. Nothing makes sense. Down is up, and left is right. And so, yes, the Colts, in theory, yes, they could be the best team in the NFL. That's actually a plausible thing right now.
The thing about Kansas City and Buffalo, and I guess I should put New England in this category, Stephen, but I'm going to stick with Kansas City and Buffalo. The reason that I get pause with those two teams, even though I realize they have been beaten, in Kansas City's case, it feels like they're just healthier and they're more in stride now. But those are the two teams that I feel like offensively can keep up with Indianapolis, and that's why they give me pause.
I don't think there's any doubt. And the other thing is experience, right? They have been the hunted before. They know what that's like, and I think that matters a lot. The Colts have not. Okay, now they have a very experienced team, and I think that will help them despite not having a lot of playoff experience per se. But it is different when you're used to being the team that everybody gets up for on your schedule. And the Chiefs have been doing that for 5 years, all right? Every Sunday they get out of bed, you're somebody's biggest game of the year. That's the real thing, man. And I think that's why it's really hard. You know, like in college football, right? You know, Indiana is like that now, right? How are they going to cope with that reality? So not to get off subject, but that's a real thing, right? There's a mental thing and an effort thing where you have to meet your opponent's effort and want to, because they really want to beat you, regardless if you care about them. So that's a reality. And I think Kansas City is better equipped to deal with that. The Bills have dealt with that a little bit. So we'll see. We will see. And I think that's going to be as much of a test as anything. How do you play as a front runner? Because that's a test in itself.
Stephen Holder is my guest, ESPN.com, where you can read his work. He is on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Stephen, it's a little early for this, I realize, but we're just now approaching the halfway point of the year, okay? I always say the one thing, and it's about the NFL that I think this more than any other sport, when a team's season comes to an end, oftentimes it comes to an end because of things that plagued them that were a microcosm of the season in general. Is there any sort of a weakness that you can look towards right now with this team that you feel like could be the one that, in fact, we are talking about at the end of the year as the microcosm that we slept on in October?
So I'm going to say something that people might disagree with, but I believe this. I think they are the most complete team in the NFL, period. And I know defense, right? Here's what I'd say. What you are seeing on defense now, which, as I already outlined, is not necessarily as bad as it looks when you think about the actual efficiency of it and what they're getting done. What you're seeing is a product of injury. They'll get some guys back. I think the pass rush is not as bad as people want to think. I think what you are seeing is a secondary that is a bunch of practice squad guys who can't defend. And it is what it is, right? As they get healthier, as Mooney Ward comes back, as maybe Jalen Jones gets going here, possibly this week, in fact, likely this week, you know, they will start, you would imagine, to look like a more put together unit. I think that the offense is bulletproof. Who do you go stop on offense? Who, if you're the opponent, if you're Mike Tomlin this week, who is the first name you're putting on the board? I don't know. You might say Jonathan Taylor. Okay, fine. Go put 8 in the box, and good luck. I'll see you 50 points later.
Right.
So I think they are the most complete team. That defensive line, for all we want to talk about pass rush, I mean, individually they have a lot of talent there, and when faced with opportunity, when quarterbacks hold the ball, they get there, right? I mean, so they're getting it done, and I don't know that I look at this team when healthy and say, well, you know what? Nah, that's what's going to kill them. You just got to go beat them. You got to be better than the Colts right now because they are good top to bottom. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Go look at the other best teams, so-called best teams in the NFL. I can find you 2, 3, 4 weaknesses. I can't find that with the Colts. They're the most complete team in the NFL.
Trade deadline is a week from today, correct? What is it, like 4 p.m.?
Yeah, typically, yes.
So that means we'll hear about what happened at like 4:10, right?
Oftentimes, yes. But, that's because when you get a big deal, they tend to happen at the deadline. That is true. So we'll see. We'll see if it leaks early and if and when something happens. But yes, that's typically what happens.
All right, Stephen Holder will have it all covered. Hopefully we'll talk to you between now and then, but we shall see. Stephen, appreciate it, and we will be watching at ESPN.com.
All right, you got it.
All right, Stephen Holder joining us, Java House Peel and Pour Guest Line. By the way, Java House has locations, several of them, up in the home area of our next guest because something happened on Friday night that I was looking up at the television and I thought to myself, is this going to be an overreaction thing or do we need to calm the waters? And I thought, let's go back to an old friend on the show to calm exactly that. And perhaps we can do so over at Java House because there are a lot of them located exactly where he is. I'll tell you who I'm talking about and what next. I believe ranked by Rolling Stone as the worst song of the 80s. I find it to be a complete banger, to be honest with you. When they go to the traffic report halfway through this song, I just turn it up and blow out the speakers. Nothing like a little Built This City, baby. Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Java House, multiple locations, including in Lafayette, but you don't need to go into one for the best coffee. You can use the code Jake25 at javahouse.com or simply put in my name on the search bar there. That's Jake Query for the bundle, which includes Liquid Science, Java House Colombian Coffee, and Wrangler Energy. Joining me now on the guest line is Brian Newbert of Gold and Black. And Friday night, I'm at dinner. I look up. Purdue is playing Kentucky in an exhibition, and they were down double digits. I think as many as 16 at one point when I looked up, and I thought to myself, are we worried about this, or are we, like, laughing at those that are? And I thought, well, Brian would be the perfect person to ask. So I bring him on the program. Brian, I'll ask simply that. With Purdue losing to Kentucky, are we worried about that?
You dare speak ill of Jefferson Starship?
No, I'm telling you, that song's a banger. But it's listed. It's listed as the worst song of the 80s. Now, your toe was tapping there, be honest, right?
Oh, a little bit. A little bit. To your question about Kentucky, no, I think it was kind of somewhere in the middle. You know, people want to find things to be concerned about when a team is number one in the country, but I think also people are inclined to understand the moment and tend to laugh at some of the overreactions. In fact, I see a lot of media actually framing their coverage as overreactions. I think that's just kind of the nature of exhibition games. But Purdue doesn't prepare for these things. I told some of Kentucky's media before the game that Purdue doesn't scout. Purdue doesn't really fully prepare to win these games. They just kind of go out there and play. And obviously you want to win the game. I think it's kind of misconstrued here that I'm saying that Purdue wants to lose. But I think if they do lose, the most important thing is they find positive to take out of losing. But they concentrate on themselves right up until game time, and then they just kind of go out there and play. I think it was evident both of those teams took a different approach. I don't think anybody wants to lose on their home floor, so I don't think when Arkansas did it a couple years ago, when Creighton did it, and obviously now when Kentucky did it, I don't blame them one bit for fully preparing to win those games. But Purdue's going to take an opposite approach. Purdue, Matt Painter wants his team to go on the road, wants them to be pushed, wants them to get their you-know-what kicked, as he will tell you. That doesn't necessarily mean he wants to lose. He just wants his team pushed to its breaking point to see what weaknesses there are and to have them experience failure when failure should surface. So I don't think there's really anything to be concerned about. Kentucky is bigger, longer, and more athletic than Purdue. That's breaking news. That's been true for as long as basketball has been played in the Commonwealth and in the state of Indiana. But when you go back and look at the game and all the discussion about how Kentucky's defense really gave Purdue problems, it did at times. Purdue only scored 65 points, but when you look at the percentage of times they got the shot they wanted, it was astronomical. Purdue missed wide-open threes all day. Trey Kaufman-Renn missed at least 3 or 4, if not 5, shots in the first half alone. He shoots 60-70% on. If that's normal, Purdue would have put up 80, 85 points, and nobody would be saying anything.
I think a lot of people, myself included, are intrigued by Daniel Jacobson just because of, and it's unfair, Brian Newbert, our guest from Golden Black, it's unfair to immediately say, well, they had Zach Edey, so here's another big guy that can just dominate. There might be more talent out of the box with Jacobson than you had with Edey. That's not a slight at Edey, right? But, I mean, Edey, just his growth was incredible. What did you see from Jacobson against Kentucky in terms of area of vulnerability and in terms of areas that were of promise?
Well, yeah, he's obviously not Zach Edey level physical presence quite yet. I mean, he's as tall as Zach Edey, but he's not going to be as powerful, as strong anytime soon, if not ever in his life. But with Zach Edey, you're also talking about a kind of a one of one guy here. The thing about Daniel Jacobson now is his height and length. The dunk and the block shot will be part of what Purdue does again this year after both were noticeably absent all last year. Purdue was horrible last season finishing at the rim. Purdue didn't block any shots after Daniel Jacobson got hurt. They blocked like one a week maybe, and if that. I think just having some rim protection between him and Oscar Clough, is going to help them defensively. It's going to help their size. Is going to help on the glass. And if Purdue becomes a better rebounding team, that is going to make them markedly better defensively, and it's going to make them better offensively too, because I think you're going to see Braden Smith get into more transition opportunities, which Purdue was really good at last year, but couldn't get into because they weren't blocking shots, they weren't generating turnovers, and they were having to fight like hell just to get defensive rebounds because they were so undersized. So I think Daniel Jacobson will have an opportunity here, to kind of keep developing into a really, really good player, but he'll also be a major contributor this year. I think Oscar Clough has been the best thing that could have happened to him because he's got to practice against this really physical dude every single day. And when Jacobson's on the floor, people are going to try to get into his chest to negate his length. They're going to try to back him down. They're going to try to be physical because when you're tall and you're still relatively skinny, people sometimes see you as a target. He's like 250 pounds. He's way better off than he was last year, but he's still long and looks skinny, even though his definition of skinny might not be necessarily reality. People are going to test him physically, and he's going to have to be up to it.
They were out-rebounded, was Purdue, in that exhibition against Kentucky. I think it was like 42-30 or something, if I read that correctly. How big
it was
a point
a 12
of emphasis?
Rebound margin, yeah.
How big a point of emphasis was that, or concern after the game was that from Matt Painter?
Well, if you kind of look at the way the game played out, I might be taking a little bit of a different approach to this, but I think it was a backhanded positive for Purdue defensively that Kentucky had to shoot 29 threes. I don't know what Kentucky's offensive identity is going to be this year. I don't know if they know what their offensive identity is going to be quite yet because they're still down some guys and whatnot. But when they have to shoot 29 threes, you're not getting beat for rebounds at the rim every single time like Purdue was last year. You're getting beat on some long rebounds. You're getting beat on some rebounds that you just can't handle for whatever reason. So I don't think it was the size and physicality in terms of the rebounding like it was last year. I think it was just kind of the way the game played out. But you can't really expect to go in there and really, really dominate Kentucky as a rebounding team the way Purdue will probably dominate some of these smaller teams, and they will be right there, I'm sure, if not better than the Texas Techs of the world, the Iowa States, Alabama, people like that. I think Purdue's going to be a good rebounding team this year. I think expecting them to be a great rebound team might be a little bit much, but I think just getting to a good rebounding team, get 2 or 3 putbacks a game, just don't have to sell out completely just to get a defensive rebound. I think it's going to make a huge difference for them, and I think that that's going to solve a lot of their problems from last season. It's going to make them a much better team. I think Oscar Clough is going to be a great defensive rebounder. I think Daniel Jacobson's going to help with his length. I think the two of those guys combined, whether it's Jacobson or Clough that Kaufman-Rent's playing next to, I think their blast radius is going to open up some opportunities for Trey Kaufman-Rent to become a better rebounder. He says he expects to be a better rebounder. Purdue says we expect him to be a better rebounder. I think they're kind of challenging him to be, but I think that stands to reason. You remember how many offensive rebounds Mason Gillis used to be able to sneak into when Zach Edey was occupying everybody around him. And I think that that's kind of the extreme comparison there, but I think Trey Kaufman-Rent's going to have some space to operate and some smaller people guarding him, and I think he can be a much better rebounder now than he was before, too.
Brian, do you find it difficult to remember whether or not a certain era is Starship, Jefferson Starship, or Jefferson Airplane? They all run together to me, right?
No, because I think they sound distinctly different. I think Jefferson Airplane sounds distinctly late 60s, and I think Jefferson Starship sounds shamelessly 80s.
And Built This City, though, we agree it is a banger, right? Like you like it. You'll turn up.
I used to go to. I grew up in New Jersey, and I had season tickets to the New Jersey Devils. And We Built This City was actually the song they played for a while when they were skating out on the ice before the game for warm-ups. And it's like forever. It's forever etched into my brain. So that brought back a lot of memories of some very bad hockey games.
You and Putty up in the stands painting the chest. I love it, man.
Just trying to support the team.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, man. It's the playoffs. Brian, appreciate it as always, man. We look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, no problem, Jake. Anytime.
Brian Newbert from goldenblack.com. I love an obscure Seinfeld reference from time to time, right? We'll come back. John will join us. It is The Crossover, brought to you by the good guys that love heating and air, and we'll see what J&B's got lined up next. Eddie, if I were to ask you your favorite place to go around and find yourself, just, if somebody said, yeah, I saw Eddie shopping the other day, what's the most likely place where you would be found?
Oh, man, I don't know because I don't really shop. That's the problem. If I do, it's for groceries.
Okay, so you'd be at, like Kroger, walking
Probably.
around?
Yeah.
Okay. For me, it would probably be, the cologne section at Nordstrom maybe be a good call.
Kroger or Meyer, one of the two.
On a Sunday, around 1, you could probably see Shannon and I at a Java House. For J&V, it's where he is today, his home away from home. He's at the Goodwill up in Carmel, right next to Wolfie's. As a matter of fact, he joins us now on the crossover, brought to you by Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, the website, 317-353-2141, the telephone number. And, John, you've got on the program today a return guest that last time he was on with you was an awesome conversation, right? Do we have John, Eddie?
I don't know. I'm not sure what
Do
happened.
you want to pretend like J&V?
I could, but I don't want to offend John by any stretch of the imagination.
Boomer Esiason, by the way, is who he has on the program today. And
I'm
Boomer
not sure what happened there. We just had him.
An awesome guest last time that he was on with John. James just walked in, looks very concerned. We'll see what happens here.
Power just went out.
Really?
At Goodwill. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I'll stick around for a minute and find out whether or not we're in the, as J&V calls it, the pad time, overtime, right?
It's funny because
Eddie and I are going to be like the Blue Jays and the Dodgers. We'll go 9 more. The hell?
Yeah, it's funny because it literally just went out right when you tried to toss it to him. He was there, then he wasn't.
That's the story of our lives, right? John, though, is going to be up next. Boomer Esiason among those that will join him. We will see whether or not the power gets restored and whether or not we go out to him, or perhaps we carry it home for you for just a little bit more. But
I'm fascinated, Jake, to watch game number 2 tonight. Or not game 2, but game 2 in L.A.
Game 4. But
Game
Shohei
4.
Ohtani, after, last night, look, he's going to be on the mound tonight. And, yes, I realize that he was walked in 4 of those appearances, but he was on the base paths for 9 different at-bats last night, had to trot around the bases a couple of times, and was out there in the field. We'll see what it means for him tonight. And I'm hoping the Blue Jays can do it, but I had the feeling last night that was probably whoever was going to win that game, that marathon. It was an unbelievable game. It was a great performance. And the Blue Jays were aggressive because they knew they had to be.
Shane, not Justin Bieber on the mound tonight for Toronto. And the part I'm most interested in, Jake, is how Dave Roberts will handle Shohei Ohtani.
Right.
Just because of the fact he's been kind of limited on a pitch count for most of the season because he was coming back from his second Tommy John surgery.
Look at his last outing. He was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he's not human. That's the other thing that comes into play here, right? He might be the greatest baseball player of all time. All right, I thank you for listening to Query & Company. John is up next. We'll see whether or not we can connect. If not, we will be right back with you in just a couple of minutes before J&V takes over here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.